I have the most bomb episode for you today. I am so excited about this one. I got to sit down with one of my dear friends, Dr. Sachin Patel. If you're in the Pause Breathwork community already, you probably have heard about him. When I was on my honeymoon, I brought Sachin in to do a breathwork training for our community, and oh my goodness, y'all loved it so much. So I brought him back to do an even deeper dive on breathwork, longevity, metabolic health, the three things we have to know in order to really increase the quality of our life and our health. He is a health ninja. You guys, my house is showered with little hacks and tools and products that he's recommended to me over the years that have had a massive impact on my health. And so we talk so much about all of those things in today's episode. And I know you guys are going to have a brain orgasm listening to this episode, because even though Sachin and I have been friends for years and him and I geek out on this stuff all the time, every single time I have a conversation with him, I'm blown away. Like, there was multiple things in this episode where I'm like, oh my Lord, oh my Lord. Sachin is a father. He's a husband. He's a philanthropist. He's a doctor. He's a speaker. He's an author. He's a breathwork facilitator. He's actually certified through Wim Hof, and he's a plant medicine advocate. He is convinced that the doctor of the future is the patient, which, hell yeah, to empowerment. And he's really committed himself to helping raise the consciousness of other people through being their own inner doctor. You know, my slogan of "you are your own drug," him and I are so aligned with that, realizing that the body truly is the answer. The body has the medicine. Sachin founded the Living Proof Institute, which he has pioneered with his wife, and he basically has a revolutionary approach to patient-centered healthcare. Sachin coaches hundreds of practitioners around the world, so they are empowered to deliver affordable and inspired care to their communities through his Perfect Practice mentorship program. He's an advocate for transforming the healthcare paradigm, and he has devoted his life to the betterment of healthcare for both patients and practitioners. I am so excited for you guys to tune into this episode.
Can't be contained.
That's what I'm talking about. Yo, quick question for you. Have you ever felt that feeling inside of your body like, there's something more to life? Like, yes, your life is great, but there's this little voice inside of you that's like, there's something else that my soul is meant to be doing. Maybe you're literally crushing it as a life coach, helping clients shift their mindsets, but deep down, you know that you're only scratching the surface. What you really desire is to take your clients deeper. You want to ultimately take yourself deeper. That's exactly why I want to tell you about the Pause Breathwork Facilitator Training. This is our 6-month journey that doesn't just teach you how to lead powerful breathwork sessions. It helps you heal yourself out, step into your confidence, and truly build a business doing the work that actually lights you up. This training is done fully online, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home. Do it wherever you are. And here's the best part. It doesn't just stop at breathwork techniques. There's a full-on business accelerator that's actually built into the program. So you'll know exactly how to attract clients, host retreats, and even bring breathwork into corporate spaces. If you've been feeling stuck, or you're not living up to your true potential, this is your sign. Head on over to www.pausebreathwork.com/facilitator. That's pausebreathwork.com/facilitator. And I would love to mentor you into your greatness. All right, guys, let's get back into today's show. Sachin Patel, I am so excited to have you on the Can't Be Contained podcast today. How you doing?
I'm amazing, Samantha. It's great to see you. And I'm always excited by your energy and your presence. And now we get to spend this one-on-one time together. So I couldn't ask for a better way to enjoy and savor this day.
Thanks, brother. I'm super excited as well. I remember the moment that you and I really connected, which was in San Diego at the Archangel event after I taught breathwork, I think. Yeah, after I taught breathwork. And then after I taught, you and I just got to geek out a little bit on breathwork in the industry. And whenever I find people who are as obsessed with breathwork as me, I'm like, we're basically going to be friends for life. So getting to know you has been amazing. Developing a friendship with yourself and your amazing wife has been amazing. And a couple months ago, while I was off on my honeymoon, I had the opportunity of bringing you into our community to teach all around breathwork and the science of breathwork and just the geeky part of breathwork, which is so exciting for so many people. And our community loved you. I got back from the honeymoon and I was like, guys, what were the highlights? They're like, Sachin Patel. Yeah, our community loved it. Our team loved it. So I'm really excited that we now get to go even deeper into breath work, but particularly metabolic health, which is your zone of genius and what your dharma is on this planet. So I'm stoked, dude.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share with your community. They were wonderful. And this is such a expansive topic. And what I love about breathwork is there's so many breathwork puns too. So I'm sure we'll be dropping puns throughout our conversation today.
I love a good pun. What's your favorite breathwork pun?
Good question. Just the fact that inspiration, right? The word
Mhm,
inspiration
mhm.
is from inspire, right? To breathe
Yeah.
in. And we see that all the time, like, right? And so when people say I'm so inspired, I always think of breathing and breath work. And
I
we'll
love
drop
that.
them as we go,
I
like
love
even the
it. I love it.
expansiveness of breath work that it provides us with. And
Mhm.
uh, we'll just maybe we have a drinking game where people have a wheatgrass game where we drop like a breathwork pun, they can take a
A
shot of wheatgrass.
wheatgrass game. That's more my style these days. Oh my gosh. Even if I come close to alcohol these days, my body's like, I don't want this in my body. It's interesting.
Mm,
Like, it's almost like the more embodiment work I do and the more breath work I do and the more spiritual work I do and the more I realize the connection between mind and body and just realizing that the intelligence that we have in our body gets to be so preserved, the more my body is like, no alcohol. But
mm.
sometimes my mind is like, oh, I still want a margarita. But it's very rare these days, which is nice.
That's good. That's a spiritual evolution, right? And
Yeah.
when we think of spirits, like alcohol is called
I was gonna
spirits,
say, here's a pun. I feel a
right?
pun coming on.
But it's funny, like the words, the English language is a very interesting language. It's actually one of the most challenging languages to learn because it's so ambiguous, and it can be intentionally ambiguous as well
Mhm.
because certain words can have multiple meanings, and certain sounds can be spelt multiple ways. And so like there's so many puns in the English language, and sometimes they're fun, sometimes they can actually be weapons. And the way we
Mhm.
use our words can be build powerful worlds for us, or they can destroy
Yeah.
our worlds.
Yeah.
And so that when you think of it, like a lot of not to get too far off topic, but a lot of the words that we see when we start thinking of them have dual meanings. Like the
Mm.
word, alcohol is spirits. So we're,
Yeah.
literally drinking these evil spirits from a bottle or in a glass or whatever the
Yes.
case may be. But in relationship to breath work, one of the ways that we actually detoxify and eliminate alcohol from the body is through the lungs.
Mhm.
And, the lungs are responsible for about 70% of our detoxification processes in the body. So, for those people that are doing juice fasts and cleanses and detoxes, one of the best ways that they can improve and enhance their detoxification function is by improving and enhancing the way they breathe.
Mhm. It's absolutely wild. When I was just like naming the words concept, one of my good friends, Joshua Church, was over the other day and we were talking about the word faith. And in Hebrew, that word means training. And
Hmm.
I was like, that is incredible. Like, faith is about training, like training the mind in order to live a faithful life and that like optimist life. And so it's so cool when we actually like dig into the deeper meanings around words.
Yeah, absolutely. And, without our breath, we wouldn't be able to speak those words.
Yeah. When did you get into breathwork? What's your like origin story with breathwork?
It's really fascinating because if I look back, breathing was introduced to me a very long time ago, but probably like most people, I dismissed it
Mhm.
because I associated it to meditation. And that's what it was kind of reduced down to for me. And unfortunately, I didn't really step into it until I had a more dramatic experience. So I went to a Wim Hof training
Mhm.
in Toronto. I think it was like
Mhm.
2018, so about 6 years ago. And that really showed me the power of breath work,
Yeah.
right? What we could do. And,
Mm.
I'm the type of person that enjoys extremes, right? Going to the
Mhm.
edge of what's possible. And by the end of that session, I was able to hold my breath for over 3 minutes. And I was just like blown away with how responsive my body was
Mhm.
to that intervention. And
Mhm.
then at the end of it, we were jumping in this tiny little kiddie pool with ice cubes in it in the middle of winter in Toronto. It was
Woo,
around
baby.
it was around February. And so I was like, "Oh my god, like how am I going to do this?" But I realized that I could use my breath to alter my physiology and of course
Mhm.
it helps when you have people motivating you and cheering for you. And it was just a very fascinating, unique experience. And so I became friends with the instructor, Giovanni Bartolomeo. I believe you
Oh,
might know
let's
him.
go. I love him so
Yeah,
much.
so Gio and I just became fast friends, and
Mm.
I was there with at the time I was recording my experience. I was vlogging and stuff like that. So he's like, "Who's this guy with the camera?" Like, I was the only guy there, and I asked him permission to record, and he was okay with it. So we just kind of hit it off. And the cool thing is that he started offering breathwork experiences.
Mm.
And so I went to one of the breathwork experiences and I'm like, oh my God, this is almost like a psychedelic type of experience.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
realized that there's more to learn here. There's more to
Yeah.
kind of go down the rabbit hole. And then COVID happened. And that was an interesting time for me because there's a few things that were happening in my life. One, my son was having some dental work he needed. When he was young, he had a mouthful of cavities, and we couldn't really figure out why. And I realized that it was dysfunctional breathing that was causing his cavities. So we worked on correcting that. But because of poor tongue placement, because he was a habitual mouth breather, his upper palate didn't develop correctly. So
Mm.
the dentist that we went to at the time, actually went to four different dentists to get their opinions. They all said we need to pull his teeth so that his adult teeth can come in because there's no room for them. And I'm like, that doesn't really make sense to me. That God made us with too many teeth.
Right.
So we started learning and going down different rabbit holes when it came to dentistry and facial structure. And as a chiropractor, for me, my philosophy is that we're born in the image of perfection,
Mm.
and if we provide the right inputs to the body, it does exactly what it's designed to do. And so, right around that time, James Nestor released this book, Breath. And
Mhm.
I started learning from that book, and I'm like, oh my God, like the way we breathe changes the structure of our face. And
Yes.
so then I started looking for a more holistic dental approach, an airway
Mhm.
dentist for my son. And we found an airway dentist about an hour away from where we live. And so my son started getting interventions through her, Dr. Mandeep Johal. And so she put an expander into his mouth. And now he's got this wide, bright, beautiful smile and plenty
No.
of room. All of his teeth came
Oh.
in. And it was just absolutely amazing to see that. And so no teeth had to be extracted. His breathing improved. The reason he was a mouth breather was because he had a hard time breathing through his nose. And now
Mm.
he doesn't have that problem anymore. And
Mm.
so breath work, helped my son. My wife had chronic neck pain issues that as a chiropractor I couldn't resolve. It would feel good in the moment and then,
Yeah.
a couple of days later it would start coming back. And it turns out when we went to the airway dentist, she had a tongue tie. And
No
a tongue
way.
tie is a little frenulum at the bottom of our tongue. It's a little piece of flap of skin. And for some people, that frenulum can be very pronounced or very thick, which makes it difficult for the tongue to sit in the roof of the mouth. And so when she was young, she would suck her thumb
Mm.
because there's a button in the top of our mouth that soothes us and
Mhm.
soothes our nervous system. And so one of the things that she had a hard time with was latching when she was breastfeeding. She
Mhm.
sucked her thumb to soothe herself, and she was also a habitual mouth breather.
Mm.
And so, for as long as I've known her, she's, had dental issues and challenges and cavities. And I'm like, you brush your teeth like 2, 3 times a day. Like, how is it that I have no cavities and you're always, not that she has a ton, but, it would be a, somewhat more frequent occurrence than I'd like it to be.
Mhm.
And it turns out that because of her tongue tie, she was a mouth breather, which was causing her low grade anxiety as well. And once she had that awareness, she got that tongue tie snipped, and instantly her neck pain disappeared. our
Wow.
our tongue is actually connected to our shoulder. And most people don't know this. So a lot of people have chronic neck and upper shoulder pain that
Mhm.
doesn't seem to resolve. They keep working on where the pain is, but the
Yeah.
pain could be coming from,
Oh, that's
the tongue tie
fascinating.
itself. So it helped her. And then for me, it helped me have ecstatic and, out of body type of experiences, but I used to snore. And so snoring is a dysfunctional form of breathing, especially at night. And so I started doing some breathing practices and exercises that helped me eliminate my snoring completely. So now I
Mm.
don't snore. And my wife is a light sleeper. So she's very happy about that. And I'm very happy about that because I wake up so much more refreshed in the morning.
Mhm.
So those are the three, just some of the ways it's impacted me in my life. But then it kind of brought together, like breathing brought together several areas of my life. So,
Yeah.
one, the structural component. So, as a chiropractor, like we're really focused on structure. The other component was as a functional medicine practitioner, we're focused on cellular biology and root cause. And, people's dysfunctional breathing can be the root cause of metabolic chaos in their body without them
Mm.
realizing it. And as
Mm.
we'll probably talk about today, breath is a domino. It affects so many different
Yeah.
areas in our body. And that's by design, right?
Yeah.
If I was an intelligent creator, I would make it so simple for you to be healthy. And if you
Yeah.
just did one thing right, then that would have a cascade effect
Yes.
of 1,000 things going right in your body. And
Yes.
breath is one of those entry points and portals
Yeah.
into better metabolic health. And then the other component is, I really got into psychedelics at one point, and I'm like, wow, we can have amazing and ecstatic spiritual experiences and release trauma and of course you've experienced and
Mm.
help facilitate those experiences for people. So
Mhm.
it just brought so many of my worlds together. And in chiropractic college I used to teach head and neck anatomy, so I have a very like familiar
Yeah.
understanding of how all this anatomy works. And so it's been like really really fun to go down this path. And what's happened for me, Sam, is that without even trying, just so many doors have opened up.
Mhm.
Opportunities like this to have this conversation with you, to speak to your community. I'll be speaking at IFM, which
Mm.
for the first time ever, they're going to have a breathwork facilitator
Yes.
there. And so, that's like, for me, that's one of my highest professional accolades. And, I wouldn't have been able to, get on stage and talk about all the other areas of
Mhm.
interest because there's so many world-class experts in that area. And it just, I was able to really make a name for myself professionally as a functional medicine holistic health practitioner in the area of breath work, because I speak about it from so many different vantage
Yeah.
points, and it just lands for practitioners as well.
What I love about your body of work is you really focus on breath work for everyday living. Pause and myself were really focused on breath work for transformation, spiritual
Mhm.
ascension, trauma healing. And so it's like James Nestor in his book actually calls the type of breath work we do at Pause breath X or breathing X. Did an interview with him when his book came out on my podcast years ago. Gosh, this is probably like 2019 it was back in the day.
Mhm.
So I think he calls it like breathing X. But what's really important and really what I love about the work that you do is how are we breathing when we're not doing breath work, right? So
Mhm.
when we're sitting at our computer, when we're doing the dishes, I've been really intentional recently on when I am in yoga, really truly doing it how yoga is meant to be done, which is breath to movement. And
Mhm.
so in my early 20s, I used to do like a ton of Bikram yoga. And it was more so in my 20s, yoga for me was like a workout, like let's get a sweat on, let's work out. It was more from a place of let's look hot versus let's be mobile and healthy. And these days, 15 years later, I really do go to yoga for the mobility and for my mental health and
Mhm.
just to feel amazing. But what I've really been paying attention to is breath to movement. And it's revolutionized my practice in the most extraordinary way. And my curiosity is the quality of our breath is directly related to the quality of our emotional state. So if
Yep.
we can master one thing in this life, I'm going to die on the hill of let's master our breath because to your point, it's the domino of everything. My
Mhm.
question to you is what stops people from having that consistent fluid breath moving in and out of their body on a daily basis? I can already like feel the listeners as they're listening to this probably taking a deep breath, and if not, let's go. But what are those blockers, whether it's a mental blocker, a physiological blocker, like what stops us from breathing in a way that is conducive to the health of our nervous system? That's a big question. You can go where you want with that.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. And I don't want to make any assumptions about anyone who's listening to this. And we all have our own stories and journeys that we need to go on. But from my understanding and what I've witnessed is we're all born perfect breathers. So we are born
Mm,
and, we
mm,
are naturally belly breathers. And then over time, we start developing what I would, call either big T or little t traumas. And these traumas are actually stored in our diaphragm.
mhm.
So the diaphragm is where we store trauma, and the lungs is where we store grief. And this is well
Which is
established.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just makes total sense when you think
Mhm.
about it. So the diaphragm does three things. One of the things that it does is it helps us, it's referred to as a second heart. So it helps the heart pump blood. As our lungs expand and contract, the heart sits in between our diaphragm and our lungs. So with every breath we take, we're mechanically assisting the heart in pumping blood. The second thing is the diaphragm, as it moves up and down 23,000 times a day, it's going to also pump the lymphatic system. So some of our biggest lymph nodes are actually underneath our diaphragm.
Mm,
And that's a great place for God to put them, because where else would you want to put them? If you're
right,
taking 23,000 breaths every day,
right.
let's pump that system in a way that makes sense. But the third
Yes.
system that doesn't get a
Mm,
lot of attention is a myofascial system.
mm,
So the diaphragm, and it makes sense. Again, the myofascial system, for those of you that are new to the concept, is basically a web-like matrix that envelopes every cell and tissue in our body.
mhm,
In fact, every nucleus of every cell in your body is simultaneously connected to this myofascial matrix. You are
mm.
literally connected in real time with every cell in your body. So it's kind of fascinating when you think about it. And of course, if we're going to have a stabilizing unit for that myofascial system, we're going to put it in the middle of the body. We're
Yeah,
not going to put it up here. We're not
yeah.
going to put it in the bottom of our body. We're going to put it right in the middle. So if you think about when people experience any trauma, oftentimes, I've been guilty of this with my son before I knew better, and perhaps my parents were guilty of this before they knew better. But the only way to stop crying is to stop breathing.
Yes, yes,
And
yeah.
so when we don't fully express ourselves through our, the one of the best ways for the nervous system to release is through crying. We know this
Mhm,
as adults, but think about all the times when we were children when we felt like crying or we were in pain, but we were told to stop crying. And so when we take
mm.
that diaphragm that's, trying to release that trauma and move that energy and we make it stop, right? That energy has to go somewhere.
Right.
So now what happens? This is a theory of mine, so I'm open to it being wrong, but I think it makes sense. Is that when we're told to stop breathing, right? That energy has to go somewhere, and just like trigger points can restrict the mobility of our muscles, these trigger points or these adhesions can restrict the
The
movement of our
movement.
diaphragm. So over
Yeah,
time, our
yeah.
diaphragm actually has a story to tell. Our breath has a story to tell. So then when we take people through breath work, or when you take people through breath work, for example, now we're really moving that energy. We're not just moving the air that's coming in and out. We're actually moving that diaphragm, which is pumping
Yes.
that air and releasing, all that stuff that they're holding on to. And because they're releasing it and they have a safe container that's being created, they can let it go. And that's when the transformation starts to take place. And when you never really meet
Mhm,
yourself,
mhm,
the true version of
mhm,
yourself,
mhm.
until you have like a well-functioning diaphragm, right? Like
You
there's
know,
so much tied up in that one muscle in your body.
it's so true, and I love that theory, and I think you're absolutely right, and it's wild because the majority of the experiences that people have when they are in those cathartic, deep, psychedelic breathwork experiences is experiences from when they're like 4 years old, 5 years
Mhm.
old, right? Of like the embodiment of that younger version of ourselves, purging, healing, letting go, forgiving, the amount of people after a session that will come up to me and say, I just forgave my dad. I just forgave my mom. I just forgave my brother. It's like we are going back to the scene of the crime, the do not cry, stop crying. No, don't feel like that. Be like, grow up, whatever it is. We're going back to the scene of the crime and we're actually purging and releasing that literal stuck energy that is in the
Mhm.
diaphragm. Oh, that's so good. I've got like goosebumps as I'm thinking about that.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's so people don't realize that that's where a lot of their negative emotion and energy is potentially stored. The other thing to take into consideration when it comes to breathing is that many people these days have a dysregulated nervous system. So imagine, all this trauma that we're carrying around with us, and now the diaphragm isn't moving correctly through its range of motion. So now our breathing becomes short and shallow. Think
Mm,
of a tight hamstring, think of a tight bicep muscle, right? It just hurts when we move it through its full range of motion when it's constantly tight or taut. And so as a result, people end up short shallow breathers.
mhm.
Now, when people are short shallow breathers without even knowing it, they're unknowingly telling their nervous system to be in a perpetual low grade fight or flight
Yes.
state.
Yes.
And when we're in that perpetual low grade fight or flight state, we feel anxious for no
Mhm.
reason. We might increase our cortisol levels, which might change the cravings that we have. We might go from nasal breathing to mouth breathing without realizing it. Okay.
Mhm.
We also, when we shift into that sympathetic dominant state, that's where all disease actually starts.
Mhm.
That's where catabolism lives. That's where our bodies, naturally is geared towards breaking down in order to survive.
Mhm.
Whereas growth and repair, regeneration, reproduction, restoration, rejuvenation, all the things that people are looking for in their life occur in a parasympathetic state.
Yeah.
And so we can access our nervous system directly through our breath. So, breath I refer to as the steering wheel of the nervous system.
Oh, that's
And
great.
so, if we want to feel a certain way, right, we
Mm.
can choose. Just like if I want to turn left, let's say going left is being more parasympathetic, I have 23,000 opportunities every day to choose how I want to feel. Every breath you take is a fork in the road, if you're consciously aware of it, is a fork in the road to decide how I want to feel.
Mhm.
And so if the best way to breathe, just people might be wondering, because you can't be parasympathetic breathing all the time,
Mhm.
because there's situations where you do need to be in fight or flight, right? When you're
Yeah.
working out, for example,
Yeah.
right? If you're going
Yeah.
for a sprint, you need to have fight or flight breathing. Breathing slow and like as if you were meditating is not going to work, right? So our
Mhm.
breath has to match the activity. So if our goal is to be parasympathetic, the best way for me to get there is to first check in with my breath. It's not to take ashwagandha, it's not to take theanine, right? It's not to go get a massage. I mean, all those things are going to help. But if I can just check in with my breath, it's literally the fastest, most measurable, most
Yeah.
scientifically proven way
Yeah.
to shift the state of our nervous system.
Mhm.
And so now we have direct access to this system,
Mm.
which coordinates the function of the trillions of cells in our body and all the organs and systems. And now we have better control of how we want to feel.
Yeah.
So breath is like so powerful when we start thinking about it through this lens.
Mhm.
And so as I
Mhm.
started unpacking this for myself, I'm like, holy smokes, like literally, here's another pun. The answers were right under my nose.
Yeah.
And we were missing it all along. And here we are as practitioners doing all this fancy stuff,
Mm.
and we weren't even asking people what their breath was like. And
Yeah.
that's the access point that all of us have. And going back to one of your original questions is, why do people ignore this? It's because we tend to overcomplicate things, right?
Mm.
We're all looking for simple solutions to complicated problems. But when that simple solution presents itself, we dismiss it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I kind of refer to breath as the zenith of both sophistication and simplicity.
Mm.
It's simple to do. However, there's ways to nuance the way we breathe to access different parts of our brain, to change our
Mhm.
body temperature, to change our emotional health, to change our spiritual health, right? To release traumas that we might be holding on to.
Mhm.
I mean, breath has so many different paths that it can lead us down.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the vagus nerve and how increasing the vagal tone has an impact on just perception, the way we see the world, the way we view ourselves?
Yeah, so the vagus nerve is interesting because it's like a two-way communication between the brain and and the rest of the body, the rest of the trunk organs, essentially. So the vagus
Mhm.
nerve is one of the longest nerves, most important nerves in our body, and it wraps around our heart, our lungs. It's our diaphragm is heavily innervated by the vagus nerve, and then all of our
Mhm.
organs are wrapped by the vagus nerve. So it's this two-way communication that's taking place, and our gut microbiome is sending messages to the brain, and the brain is sending messages down to the
Mhm.
gut. So it's coordinating the function of all of those organs and systems in the body. And, in terms of self perception, that's not an area that I've gone down in relationship to
Mhm.
the vagus nerve. So I don't know what the answer is there. But I do believe that when we have a healthy functioning vagus nerve,
Mhm.
the one of the ways to have a healthy functioning vagus nerve is to have a healthy breathing pattern.
Yeah.
And of course, our diet plays a role, and other aspects of our health play a role. And there's different access points to the vagus nerve, right? So there's stimulants that you can use that go around your neck, right, to
Mm.
stimulate electronically the vagus nerve. Humming can stimulate the vagus nerve.
Mm.
Talking can stimulate the vagus nerve. Gargling can stimulate the vagus nerve.
Mhm.
Singing stimulates the vagus nerve.
Mhm.
So there's gagging, tongue
Yeah.
scraping, those type of things
Yeah. Yeah.
stimulate the vagus nerve. And what we find is just kind of mechanistically, many people have an understimulated vagus nerve,
Yeah.
right? People aren't singing as much as they used to. They aren't chanting as
Mm.
much as they used to. They're
Mhm.
not breathing as functionally as they should be. Most of
Mhm.
our communication now is through text. I mean, think about
Yeah.
how few phone calls you have nowadays,
Yeah.
right? And so when we speak, we're actually mechanically stimulating our vagus nerve, and so we're finding more and more people need that.
And
One of
there's a
the
direct correlation between the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system. From my understanding, the stronger the vagus nerve is, the more likely we are to rest in the parasympathetic nervous system. Is that right?
Right, yeah, you
Yeah.
want a healthy functioning vagus nerve,
Mhm.
and that's going to help you get deeper into that parasympathetic state.
Mm. It's sort of like the bridge between science and spirituality, the vagus nerve. There's so much to learn there, and I
Mhm.
feel like it's yeah, I think it's under I don't think people realize that they have this part of us that has the capacity and the ability to really tap into our potential, our
Yeah,
innate intelligence, our ability
yeah.
to view life in a different way.
I agree, and
Mm.
I have a friend who's an expert who wrote a book on the vagus nerve. So happy to make an intro. You can
Ooh, what's that
do
book?
a
Let's
deep
put it in the
dive.
comments.
Activating Your Vagus Nerve
Okay, cool,
by
and I
Dr.
would love
Naval
an
Ravikant.
intro to bring them on. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you. So, can we talk a little bit about longevity as it pertains to lung capacity? And
Yeah,
how we actually like tools to actually increase our lung capacity, and if there are any other health benefits to increasing our lung capacity.
yeah. So in the Framingham study, what James Nestor talks about in his book, they found that lung capacity was the greatest predictor of lifespan. And that makes sense because, the quality of our breath determines the quality of our metabolic health.
Mhm.
And one of the things that you can do to increase lung capacity, aside from taking periodic deep breaths, I feel most people like to be able to measure. And one of the tools that people can get is called an incentive spirometer. So,
Mm.
an incentive spirometer is basically a device that you breathe into and
Mhm.
breathe out, right? And what it'll do is it'll measure your lung capacity. And so it's a nice way. They give it to people in the hospital when they have pneumonia. That's usually when people receive one. And they're, cheap little plastic devices you can get on Amazon. And they're very inexpensive for about 20 bucks. And that's a great way to train your diaphragmatic range of motion.
Mhm.
So moving that diaphragm up and down. Another important thing that people can do is trigger point work on their diaphragm. So laying on their back with their abdomen relaxed, just hooking their fingers and just poking around a little bit underneath their rib cage,
Yeah.
seeing if they can feel any trigger points. And it's not uncommon for people to be able to see that. That's going to release
Mhm.
some of the restrictions that they have. Another thing that's interesting, fascially, the hip flexors are connected to the diaphragm as well. So people with habitually tight hip flexors, might have, difficulty with taking that diaphragm through its full range of motion. So I really
Mm.
emphasize, something as simple as an incentives barometer because people can get that pretty affordably on Amazon.
Mhm.
That's a great way to increase lung capacity. And here's the other thing that's interesting, kind of paradoxical, if you will, is that the less you breathe, the longer you live.
Mhm.
So if you ever encounter a Himalayan yogi, okay, they're going to be breathing super slow. And when you breathe super slow, you actually put your body into this suspended state of animation. If you
Mhm.
study animals, the animals that breathe the most live the shortest. So, for example, a human being takes about 15 to 20 breaths a minute. A dog takes about 35. A dog ages about 7 times faster. A
Mm.
turtle takes about 2 to 3 breaths a minute and lives to about 120 years. They say that an elephant and a mouse have the same number of breaths, and a mouse lives, a couple of years, and an elephant lives several decades.
Mhm.
So the amount that we breathe and the frequency and cadence of our breath has also been linked to lifespan as well. So it's not practical for us to just sit in a corner and take slow breaths. I understand that. However, we
Be nice though. That
overbreathe.
feels great. Just drinking some tea, doing some nice slow breathing. That sounds
Yeah.
like my idea of a good time.
Mine too, right? And well, here's the thing.
Mm.
So, one of the things that we encourage people to do is to slow down their breath. And so, as a daily
Mm.
practice, as just, creating awareness around this topic, is we encourage people to breathe slower. Most people, just like most people overeat, most people overbreathe.
Mhm.
So we talked about the average person taking about 15 to 20 breaths a minute. That's about a 3 to 4 second loop, right? So they're
Mm.
breathing in for 2 seconds, out for 2 seconds, and that gets us to about 15 seconds. However, if we go to 6 seconds in and 6 seconds out, which feels a lot slower, now we're down to about 5 breaths a minute. So significantly less intake of air. However, it puts our nervous system into a state of coherence. And
Mm.
when we're in that state of coherence, our brain and our heart are much more deeply connected to one another.
Mhm.
And that's when the real us shows up. So if you ever want
Mhm.
to meet the real you, slow down your breath because
Mm.
that's the version of you that is connected where your heart and your brain
Mm.
are connected.
I was
And
gonna say
that's
the Heart Math Institute did a bunch of studies on this, didn't they?
mhm.
And they called it I think it's literally just called the heart breath that they branded?
It might be heart breath or coherence breath. I don't.
Coherence breath. I think
Yeah,
it something like that, but I remember reading this years ago. It's 6
yeah,
in, 6 out.
yeah. And James
Okay.
talks about in his book, and many ancient prayers are actually tuned into this breathing cadence. So Ave Maria, for example, is tuned into this 6 in, 6 out. And they probably didn't know why, but it gets us into that state that we desire to be in, which is
Mm.
calm, creative,
Mm.
intellectual, connected.
Yeah.
And when we breathe that way, it really helps us hold space for other people around us as well.
So again, this is the suggested breath to do when we're not doing breath work for transformation. So my question to you is, with all of this, um, like, yeah, with all of this like guidance around breathing, what's your professional advice on breath work done with the mouth?
Yeah, great question. So, when we're doing transformational breath work, when you're doing your breath work, and even when I do mine, we encourage people to breathe through the mouth
Mhm.
because we're really trying to move a lot of air, right? The goal here is to activate the nervous system.
Mhm.
And in order for us to do that, we have to really be able to move that diaphragm, right? Breathing
Yeah.
to your through your nose might be a little too slow,
Mhm.
unless you're very well trained and have really open nasal passages that makes it easier. But for most people, breathing in and out through the mouth is going to be the most activating form of breathing.
Mhm.
And you can take people through different cadences of breathing and styles of breathing, even
Yeah.
in the same breathwork session, right? So you can have them breathe in and
Mhm.
out through the mouth for a period of time, and then they can do calm, relaxed exhales through their nose if they wanted to. So there's different ways that we can, uh, you know, take them through that breathing journey.
Mhm.
However, that's usually short lived, right? So it might be 10 minutes a day, maybe half an hour a day. at the most, maybe an hour a day. If you're doing that daily, that's pretty amazing. However, I'm very focused on how people breathe the rest of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I encourage people to do is you want to breathe in accordance to your activity. So I
Mhm.
believe that there's 3 gears of breathing. The first gear is in and out through the nose, right? So right now when I'm speaking, I'm going to pause and take a breath in through my nose whenever I remember to, and then I'm going to breathe out through my mouth, right? So that
Mhm.
obviously I can't talk through my nose, so I have to speak through my mouth.
Yeah.
However, uh, so the baseline gear for checking emails, we're driving in the car, in bed, maybe watching TV, I'm always going to come back to my coherence breath. 6 seconds
Mhm.
in, 6 seconds out, or whatever feels right for me, right? For some people, 4 in, 4 out might feel better. We don't want you to feel aggravated or agitated by this breathing pattern, right? And I don't
Mhm.
necessarily want people to overthink it, but just remember, let's breathe in and out through the nose as slow as we can, as slow as is comfortable for us. And let's keep our tongue at the roof of our mouth. There is a magic button at the roof of the mouth that further activates the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic
What is that
system.
called again? What's that button?
I don't know what it's called. I don't know if there's
No.
a scientific
It's why
name for
babies
it,
suck
but
their thumbs because 'cause they're,
yeah.
like, pushing it up. Why did we stop sucking our thumbs?
Why do people stop sucking their
Yeah,
thumbs?
why don't we still suck our thumbs? I'm gonna
Well,
I'm gonna start the trend. I'm gonna start the thumb sucking club.
well, a couple things. There's a reason that children do suck their thumb, and part of it we talked about earlier is the tongue tie. They can't
Yeah.
get their tongue at
Yes.
the roof of their
Yes, yes.
mouth, so it helps them push that button. If you think about it, a pacifier will push that button, their thumb will push that button, the mother's nipple will push that button, and the consequence of that for people who do that is it pushes their palate upwards.
Mhm.
So what ends up
Mhm.
happening is, and this is what happened to my wife too, is it pushed her palate upwards. So instead of having a nice arch in the palate, it ends up being more like this. And that
Mhm.
actually creates a smaller airway. So
Mm.
it's discouraged for people to suck their thumbs, especially in the formative years of their skull, because it's going to change the shape of their face. And it actually makes it restrictive for them to breathe through their nose. And then they further perpetuate the mouth breathing because there's less resistance for them to breathe through their mouth versus their nose.
So what you're saying is it actually makes more sense for us to suck our thumbs as adults than as children? I'm starting a movement, Sachin. Just you look, coming to an Instagram channel near you.
Yeah, I mean the alternative is you could, just massage the roof of your mouth with your
Yeah.
tongue, right?
Yeah,
Just
okay, okay.
just really
Maybe that's more
replace the
socially
button.
acceptable. What would
Yeah,
you do if, like, the next mastermind that you and I are at together, I'm just sitting at the table across from you sucking my thumb? I'm gonna tell everyone you told me to.
You know what you should do? You should create a lollipop that's shaped like a thumb, and then it just looks
Oh.
like you're sucking on a lollipop, and then when you pull it out, it's a thumb, and people are like, "What the heck is that?"
Oh my gosh, I'm doing that. I'll give you some equity. I'll take it on Shark Tank. That's gonna be the next big thing.
So that's the first gear, in and out through the
Yeah.
nose, breathing slow, tongue at the roof of the mouth, okay? Second gear is in through the nose, out through the mouth,
So that'd be
right?
the for
So
everyone listening, that's the halo. At pause, in through the nose, out through the nose is bliss, like that state of bliss, and then in through the nose, out through the mouth is called halo.
mm.
Because it creates this, like, circular halo type of
Oh,
vibe. Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, so, like, visualizing, like, golden light coming in, golden light coming out, and then that's coming back into the nose. Yeah, I love that.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's circular
Mhm.
pattern. And then the
Mhm.
third gear would be in and out through the mouth. So I'd give someone an example. So, like a crude example would be if I'm sitting at my desk, it makes sense for me to be breathing in and out through my nose, right? If I'm
Mhm.
having a conversation, in through the nose, out through the mouth as much as I can. If I'm going for a walk, I'm going to try to maintain nasal breathing. But as soon as I can't do that anymore, then I'm going to focus on breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth. Because as that CO2 accumulates in our body as a
Mhm.
byproduct of cellular metabolism, we have to be able to get rid of that waste, right?
Mhm.
But we want to bring in nice, clean, pressurized, purified air in through the nose as much as we can. And then if we start running or sprinting, then we want to breathe in and out through our mouth. right? And the reason we
Mm.
want to do that is because we want to create a rapid expansion and contraction and movement of our diaphragm, because that's actually going to assist the heart in pumping blood. We want to
Yeah.
use the lungs and the diaphragm to actually increase blood pressure, because if I'm running, I need to send blood to my
Mm.
fingers and to my
Mhm.
toes and to my legs.
Mhm.
I need to send it quickly away from the respiratory system and
That's right.
circulate throughout the body. So we're
That's right.
actually helping the body in breathing. And then if I'm sprinting or pushing myself really hard, and then I'm going into a relaxation or coming down from that, I'm going to go in and out through my mouth, and then in through the nose, out through the mouth, and then back down to in and out through the nose. And here's the thing, our cardiovascular and metabolic health is determined by how fast we can recover from a high intensity exercise. So if
Mm.
somebody goes through a high intensity exercise and then they're just and then they're just continuing to breathe in and out through their mouth, right? They're not going to recover
Mhm.
as well as somebody who then shifts to nasal breathing and then exhaling through the mouth and then down regulates into breathing in and out through their nose.
Mm. So fascinating. If you were to give one tool to people, if you were to say, "Hey guys, don't do anything else, but just do this one thing in order to improve your metabolic health, your longevity, your quality of life," what would that one thing be?
Oh, I mean, it'd be exactly what we're talking about
Yeah,
right now.
that's
We
what I
would
was
be
thinking.
teaching people how to breathe. I think there's three things that I like to focus on with people that
Mhm.
I feel can create rapid transformation in their overall health. The first one is breath, because I can change that any time of day,
And
right? So
and
what?
w specifically would be the 6 in, 6 out when you're not
Yeah,
doing breath work, when you're just doing life.
yeah, just slow down, right? If all we can do is place our tongue at the roof of our mouth, slow down our breathing, breathe in and out through the nose, the world will become a better place. We
I
will see the
love that,
world through a
Sachin.
different
I
lens as
agree
well.
completely. I
uh,
agree completely.
so that's one place to start. Is change our breath. So if you're listening to this in the morning or at night, before bed, whatever the case may be, that's my advice to you. The second thing that we can change that creates massive transformation in our body that's often overlooked is light. And
Mm.
so the biological clocks in our body are regulated by the rising and setting of the sun. And so there's important information that's downloaded through natural sunlight that you can't get anywhere else. You can't get it through supplements, you can't get it through medications, you can't get it
Mm.
through listening to something. You literally have to look
Mm.
at the sun, not stare at it directly, but be in the
Be in the
sun.
sun.
And there's times of the day where you can stare at the sun, but that's signaling and activating specific genes in your body.
Mm.
So many people have low vitamin D as an example. And low vitamin D isn't a vitamin D deficiency, it's a sunshine deficiency.
I love that you
And
just shared that because I learned that a couple years ago, and I was like, "That makes so much sense."
yeah, and there's
That's
so
why I
many.
moved to San Diego. Do you wanna come live down here with me?
I'm thinking about it.
Dude,
People and
I
I
am
talk
like the
about it
San
all the
Diego
time.
recruiter. Like, I am like, "Everyone must live here. My quality of life increased so much. It's the best place on earth." Anyway,
Yeah, I love San Diego. I'll actually be there later this year and maybe we'll connect. But
I would love that.
yeah, I'm a big believer in the power of circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
And our circadian rhythm kind of guides all of our internal clocks. Now, unfortunately, this day and age, we're exposed to so much artificial light, blue light. That's why I'm wearing these glasses to kind of filter out and bring in good light into my eyes.
Mm.
And earlier today, I was out in the sun, getting the sun into my eyes. This process is known as circadian biology.
Mm.
And so, if we can be outside at different times of the day, just being in the sun, getting as much of our skin exposed as we can, the abdomen is a really
Mm.
excellent place to get sun
Mhm.
exposure because it
Wait,
activates us.
why?
Well, think about it. The abdomen is called the solar plexus.
Oh my goodness! That is legit.
So, it's
I'm
no
putting on my blue
coincidence.
blockers right now, actually. You convinced me. Okay, there we go. Oh, so much better.
Yeah, there we go. And then even if you think about it, the from a chakra standpoint, the chakra color that coordinates with the solar plexus is yellow. And not
This is
only
all my world is just expanding by the minute talking to you. This is incredible.
So there's a I won't go down this rabbit hole, but I'll just drop this little nugget here. There's a specific gene called POMC, and
POM, C, like POM?
POMC. And
POMC.
Dr. Jack Cruz talks about this a lot. Dr. Alexis Cowan talks about this a
Mm,
lot. And so if you want to go deeper down this rabbit hole, I would encourage following their work. But POMC stands for pro-opiomelanocortin. So
mm,
pro means it increases. Opio is for opioid, so it increases natural opioid production. This is why
mhm,
being in the sun reduces pain.
mhm,
And then melanocortin, so this actually, melano is melanocyte stimulating
mhm,
hormone. So that's what
mhm.
gives our skin its pigmentation.
And yeah.
But interestingly enough, there's different types of MSH, alpha, beta, gamma, and they actually decrease our appetite. So just like you can eat food, you can eat the sun. Your body actually gets energy from the sun. You literally turn into a battery. You can study the work of Jared Pollock. He discovered what's called the fourth phase of water.
Mm,
And the sun actually activates something called easy water. It creates something
mm,
called an exclusion zone. And when you have an exclusion zone, you have a polarity, you have a charge.
mm,
So you literally get charged in the
mm,
sun. Now, the
mm.
food industry doesn't want you to know this.
Isn't there like a sunitarian, like people who live off the sun? That's a
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, there's breatharians
breatharian.
and
Yep.
okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So like so then the sun actually charges us.
yeah. Mhm.
And what's interesting is that when you are in the sun more, you actually have less cravings because your caloric intake is
Fascinating,
not as there isn't as
fascinating.
much caloric intake required. So when we work with people on metabolic health, if they're hungry all the time, I know that they're getting toxic light, and the toxic light is signaling cortisol production.
Mm,
It's causing decreased blood flow because it creates a hypoxic situation. So if you're in
mhm,
blue light all day, you're actually
mm,
becoming hypoxic as a result of that.
mm, mm,
Go out in the sun, you instantly increase nitric oxide.
mm,
You instantly activate the water in your body because of
mm,
the red and infrared light and the
mhm,
benefits of it. And you start creating this polarity, which starts charging your body. So we always have more
mhm.
energy when we're in the sun. And so circadian biology is crucial. Now, when people have low vitamin D, giving them vitamin D doesn't activate that gene.
So wild, right?
So we're
What a
missing that.
misconception. What a
Yeah.
misconception.
Yeah.
I thought our medical system was perfect.
Well, every system does
Totally
exactly what it's
kidding.
designed to do,
Mhm.
right? And so
Yeah.
it's not designed to make you healthy, it's designed to make them rich. So
Yeah.
that's exactly what it does.
Which is why we need, you all in your power doing you doing your shit. It's kinda beautiful the last couple of years how, like, the veil has been lifted on all that. That's a whole
Mm.
other podcast. Maybe we can do that when you're in San Diego in person, but
Yeah, that'd be fun.
yeah.
The last part is cortin. So cortin, it basically stimulates the adrenals. So for example, when the
Mm,
sun rises and we get sunlight exposure, that activates something called ACTH, which is adrenocorticotrophin hormone, which rebuilds our adrenal glands. So every day when
interesting.
you're exposed to the sun, especially in the morning, it's activating and telling your body to start rebuilding and repairing the adrenals. So a lot of
Wow.
people who are on adrenal supplements,
Yeah.
right, are feeling drained or their adrenals are burnt out. They're
Mm.
not getting sunlight at the right time of day, and chances are they're probably
Mm.
burning the candle at both ends,
Mhm.
right? They're
Mhm.
sitting in front of a
Mhm.
computer screen under artificial light. And so there's an app that I recommend. It's called Circadian.
Mhm.
And Circadian reminds you throughout the day when to get outside. Because remember, the sun is changing its position. And that change in position means that the light hits our retina in a slightly different spot.
Sure, sure.
And so, just like a sundial, if you look at a sundial, you'll see the shadow is moving,
Mhm.
right, as the day goes on. Well, there's a little sundial in our eyes,
Mm.
in our retina, that tells our
Yeah.
brain what time of day it is.
Mm.
And I'll explain this as an analogy. So, imagine you had somebody come and clean your house.
Mhm.
Imagine they came and cleaned your house every single day, right? And they started in one room and they kind of had the same pattern and they worked around in different rooms. But so our brain does the same thing, our body does the same thing. The signal that it gets to change rooms is
Mhm.
based on where the sun is in the sky. So if you study Chinese medicine, we have a body clock, we have a biological clock internally. So just like the cleaning person would go through different rooms in your house, the body goes through different organs and systems and heals them based
Wow.
on what time of day it is.
Wow.
But if it's 12
Wow.
o'clock all day, right, and they just keep looking at their
Mhm.
clock and like, oh, no
Right?
time has passed.
Yeah.
It's the same time. Then they just stay in that same room and clean it, and all the other rooms stay dirty.
That is so wild. The body is so intelligent. It's so intelligent.
Well, we have
Mm.
this intelligent design, but we've tried to outsmart. We think we
Yeah.
can outsmart
We
nature,
think we can. And
right?
when we come back to it, it's like, the 2 things that we've really talked about on this podcast are like breath, right? It's like the most simple thing is gonna have the biggest impact, right? Light. What's your thoughts on red light?
Oh, it's great. I start
Okay.
every morning with red light therapy.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's a
So
great
do
way to
we.
end the day for people. And here's the thing, like not everyone may be able to afford a panel, right? So people think, oh my God, I have to buy all this stuff. But 50% of the light that comes from the
From the
sun
sun
is
is
red and infrared light.
I
So
don't think
it's
people realize that. I also learned that a couple years ago, you
yeah,
know?
so it's absolutely free if you don't want to buy
Mm,
a panel. But I live in
mhm.
Toronto, so
Yeah,
the
I was
panels don't
gonna
always
say, how's that working out for you there?
it works out. We're making it
No,
work.
Toronto
We're making it
Toronto
work.
is actually Toronto's sunnier than Vancouver for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's really sunny today. Like it's a bright,
Yeah.
beautiful day, but it's cold, so it's hard to get like full body exposure. Not impossible, but it's hard to sit out there for an hour. Like, in the summers, I'll sit out there all day, like literally 7, 8 hours a day, and take my
Mm,
computer out there and set up my desk out
so
there
good.
and be in the sun. And so that's another important thing is circadian biology. And the third one is sleep and
Mhm,
recovery and rest. This is something that's often overlooked, but that's when we burn the most fat. That's when we repair and regenerate. That's when we
mhm,
restore our neurotransmitters. That's when a lot of our organs start to heal. That's when our brain
mm,
certainly heals. And sleep is very crucial because it's responsible for a few different hormones in our body, amongst other things. One of them is leptin, and the other one is ghrelin.
mm,
So, ghrelin, think of gremlins.
mhm,
Ghrelin tells us we're hungry. So, when people don't get a good night's sleep, they feel hungry all the time.
mhm,
And
mhm,
it also makes us resistant to leptin.
mm,
Leptin is a hormone that's released by our fat cells that tells us we're full. So when somebody gets poor sleep, even just a night or a few nights of poor sleep, they feel hungry all the time and they never feel satiated.
yeah,
So now they think, oh my God, I'm so bad. I can't maintain my diet. And why am I craving all these foods? I have weak willpower. Well, it's actually their sleep, poor circadian rhythm, and a dysfunctional breathing pattern. And when
mm,
you fix all of those three things,
yeah,
then amazing things start happening. They start feeling like themselves again and they start craving the right foods. They start
mhm,
behaving in a manner that's consistent and in aligned with the goals that they have. But if your breathing sucks, your lighting sucks, and your sleep sucks, or
yeah.
your recovery sucks, then everything else kind of goes downhill from there.
So on that last one, sleep, I love sleep and I love just dialing in my sleep. And you actually really inspired me in this just over the years of the education that you've provided me around sleep. So I was good at sleep the last like 2 years. Since knowing you, I've gotten really great at sleep. Here's my fear. I am scared that when I have kids and I mess with that it's gonna be so intense. Is there something magical that happens in the body that allows us to need less sleep when we're having babies? Or am I just fucked?
so, so when you have a baby, I'm gonna buy you a gift, and it's gonna be a red light bulb.
Okay.
So, one of the things that we realize is the reason children have poor sleep is because they are in poor sleep environments.
Mm.
So babies tend to be more sensitive to these
Mhm.
things, right?
Mhm.
Because their nervous systems are just primed versus ours, which have been dampened a little bit.
Mhm.
But whatever affects our baby is also affecting us. So the encouragement for a lot of people is like when the sun goes down, we turn on all the red lights in our house. So,
Wow.
so there's no overhead lighting. Our television screen, if we want to watch a movie or a TV show,
Your
we have
neighbors are like, "What is going on in there?"
everything is red. So our TV turns red, my phone
Mm.
turns red, my computer turns red. Um, our kitchen lights, we turn off all the overhead lights and we use red bulbs. So we
Wow.
switch gears because, ideally it'd be completely dark, but that's not realistic for us because it gets dark here at like 5 o'clock.
Mhm.
But ideally it would be completely dark. And if you create that environment for your child and yourself and your family,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
They're going to sleep, quote unquote, like a baby. And the other thing is non-native EMF. So
Mm.
non-native EMF is going to include things like Wi-Fi. So these things, we didn't have these issues growing up. Like
Yeah.
Wi-Fi
Yeah.
didn't exist when I was a baby,
Yeah.
when our parents were babies, and this is something that often gets overlooked. So what we encourage people to do is
Wow.
have a Wi-Fi timer. So
Yes.
after a certain time, and you can get
Yes.
Christmas
Yes.
light timers. You can buy a timer on Amazon and just program it. So like at 11 o'clock at night, hopefully you're not on your computer at that time, or you're,
Mhm.
off to bed. It automatically turns off the Wi-Fi. So, and then it can turn back on at 6 in the morning or whenever people get up. There's
Amazing.
no disruption to their Wi-Fi or computer access. However, it does help them in terms of producing
Mm.
healthier sleep.
That's so good.
So I think that that's a big one. And then another
Yeah.
big one that often gets overlooked when it comes to sleep is our bed sheets. So
Ooh.
uh, linen is actually the best material for bed sheets.
Not bamboo or,
So,
co
uh, so
linen, interesting.
cotton's very heavy. It
Yeah.
doesn't breathe very well. Linen is very breathable.
Oh, okay.
Bamboo is very processed. So if you think of bamboo, they use it in construction, right, to build scaffolding.
Yeah.
And so the idea, like imagine what you have to do to it to try to turn it into like a bed sheet, right? It's
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
processed.
Right.
Linen is made from flax, so it's a natural material. But linen, very importantly, versus other materials, is also anti-static.
Mhm.
And so there's no static charge to it. If you study linen, it's biblical, but if you study it in a medical context, they used to make bed sheets out of linen in hospitals because it actually accelerated wound healing.
Mm.
Everyone has a linen closet, but nobody has linen in their closet anymore. So
Mm.
we switched to linen bed sheets, and that's what we encourage our clients to do
Amazing.
because it's much more breathable. It's a natural material. It
Mhm.
has a very high vibration. So if you want to go down a rabbit hole, you can look at the frequency of different fabrics. Everything I'm wearing right now is made out of merino wool. So
I heard that's the best. Yeah.
merino wool and linen are the two best, highest vibing fabrics, but they have opposite polarities. So you never want to wear the two at the same time. But if you want to replace something that can be beneficial for you, then replacing your bed sheets with linen bed sheets is a great place to start. And it's a one-time investment.
Mhm.
And it's not ridiculously expensive, but you're benefiting for 8 hours every night. And we have so many people like, thanking us. Like, so when we buy people housewarming gifts, they're like these really strange, seemingly strange gifts, but they are so excited when they start using it. Like the light bulb, for example, like
Yeah.
my son always makes fun of me. He's like, Dad, you like give the most boring gifts. I'm like, well, I'm not going to give somebody all this clothing that has fire retardants in it, made out of
Yeah.
plastic bottles,
Yeah.
and
There's no way.
they grow
There's
out of
no
it
way.
in like a month. I'd rather give them a light bulb that they're going to use for the rest of their life, or as
I
long as
actually
the light
have,
bulb is.
like, the most epic little gadgets in my house because of you. I have that gum that's, like, so intense and you're, like, chewing forever to, like, strengthen your jaw. People
Yep.
come over, they're like, "What are you chewing?" I'm like, "Oh, my friend told me about this." And then I have, the little, like, lint roller that I'm obsessed
Yeah.
with and use all the time, and then I remember when we did breath work with Geo, both Geos up in where were we? I think Toronto, and then you're like, "Take this pill before you do breath work." So I got all those pills. I got mouth tape. I got like all these little hacks
Oh, I
now
love it.
because of you. It's so great.
I love it.
Well, dude, I could talk to you for the next 5 hours. I feel like we definitely need to do a follow up on this podcast when you get to San Diego because the amount of value that you poured in is inspired the heck out of me. And I know it's inspiring the heck out of our community. And so I'm so
Oh,
grateful
thank
for
you.
you. I'm so grateful for your body of work. I love the work that you and your wife Deepa are doing together. You come from such an embodied place of integrity and so much care, and people really feel that. So thank you for your beingness. Thank you for your intelligence, your body of work, everything that you're doing in the world. It's an honor to know you and be your friend.
Thank you, Samantha. I appreciate that. And
Mm.
may I say one thing just
Yeah,
to
please, please,
close the
please,
loop?
please.
Because we talked about mouthwash, and that was one of the
Oh
things
yeah,
we
let's close the
discussed.
loop. I forgot.
So when we first met, we were talking about mouthwash, and I think it's really crucial to mention this to people because we all want fresh breath. Obviously,
Mhm.
one of the causes of bad breath is mouth breathing. The number
Mhm.
one cause of cavities is mouth breathing, and mouth breathing actually changes the way food tastes. So people
Mhm.
who mouth breathe actually require more sugar to taste the sweetness.
Mm.
So it can kind of change our palate and the flavor profiles that we choose. What's also interesting about mouth breathing is it destroys our oral microbiome. So it dries out the saliva. Saliva is very protective to our teeth.
Mhm.
And when our teeth dry out, then we lose that protection. And
Mm.
so many people might use mouthwash, for that reason, or because
Mhm.
they want fresh breath, or they just want to freshen their breath. But what happens with antiseptic mouthwashes is they actually kill the healthy bacteria.
Mm.
And these healthy bacteria are responsible for producing nitric oxide. So when
Mhm.
we have a healthy oral microbiome and we breathe through our nose, we increase the production of nitric oxide by sixfold. When we
Wow.
do something as simple as humming, we increase
Mhm.
nitric oxide by 15-fold. And that's amazing, but people probably want to know what nitric oxide does. Nitric oxide has many functions in the body. In fact, when the scientists that discovered nitric oxide reported it, they actually won a Nobel Prize. So that's how important this molecule is in our body. Nitric oxide kills viruses, pathogens, and bacteria on contact. So, our
Mm.
nasal mucosa, which is a mucous membrane that lines our nose, is responsible for producing that nitric oxide. And it makes sense for us to breathe through our
Mm.
nose nice and slow because we can kill that bacteria and stuff
Mhm.
that would normally enter into our lungs. So people with respiratory infections are much more likely to be mouth breathers versus
Mhm.
nasal breathers. Nitric oxide also lowers blood pressure. In fact, when they invented Viagra, it was originally developed as a blood pressure medication. And what they found was a beneficial side effect for males. Most research is done on males, and it increased circulation everywhere,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So Viagra was originally developed as a medication to lower blood pressure. However, the mechanism that it works through is by circulating and regurgitating your own nitric oxide levels.
Yeah.
So breathing can actually help us in those areas as well in that
Perfect.
microcirculation. Yeah. And then the other thing that what nitric oxide does, because it dilates our blood vessels, it increases circulation. So people
Mhm.
with like diabetes and retinopathies or, neuropathies, their nitric oxide levels are usually low because they can't get nutrients to those nerves in their
Mm.
periphery in order for them to heal. So it's not uncommon for people who use mouthwash to have high blood pressure. It's not
Mm.
uncommon for people who have long-term mouthwash use to develop neuropathies or
Mm.
tingling in their fingers, or
Mhm.
just they just can't get their hands, and feet to be warm because they're not getting the circulation there. And so changing the way we breathe will increase naturally our nitric oxide production. And then we can also just make sure we're not using things that are going to be antiseptic and kill those beneficial bacteria.
When I heard that, I got home and I threw out all of my mouthwash. I was like, "I've
A
been
friend of
lied to."
mine, yeah, a friend of mine, I was at an event and I was presenting there and we were testing everyone's nitric oxide levels. You can test them just using a strip. It takes like 10 seconds. And hers came back really low. And she's like, oh my God. I'm like, do you have high blood pressure? She's like, oh my
Mhm.
God, my blood pressure's out of control. And I've been struggling with this my whole adult life. And I'm like, do you
Mhm.
use mouthwash by any chance? She's like, yeah, I use it 2 or 3 times a day.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I said, stop using mouthwash,
Yeah.
start taking these capsules. And a
Mhm.
week later, she messaged me and her blood pressure was normal for the
So
first
good.
time in her life that she can
Wow.
remember.
Just use the little tongue scraper, little metal tongue scraper. That's good, right? That's not gonna kill me?
No, a copper tongue
Okay.
scraper is a great way
Oh,
to
copper,
activate.
okay.
Yeah.
Gotta
So,
make sure mine's copper.
yeah. And you can get them on Amazon. They're like, two for $10. So a
Mhm.
copper tongue scraper is great. And you want to gag yourself.
Mhm.
And the reason you gag yourself is because that really
Stimulates the
stimulates
vagus nerve.
your vagus nerve.
Yeah.
And you want to gag yourself to the point where you tear. Okay,
Mm.
because your vagus nerve innervates to the brainstem right next to the part of your brain that stimulates tear production. So when we get a strong stimulus, this is why when we laugh really hard, we start crying.
Yeah.
This is why when we throw up, we start crying,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a strong stimulation to the vagus nerve. So if you can gargle to the point where
Yeah.
you're tearing or gag
Yeah.
to the point where you're tearing, then you're getting a strong stimulation of the vagus nerve.
Wow. That's so interesting. Okay. I was like, "Why do I gag when I do this?" I'm like, I have such a gag reflex, but if you're saying it's healthy, I'm just gonna keep going. I'm just gonna try
Yeah.
harder to gag.
Well, use your judgment.
Eric's gonna like, "What are you doing in there, woman?"
Growing up, we used to hear all kinds of funny sounds coming out of the bathroom, and our parents would be like, just like, like gagging themselves like crazy because in India, this is just like normal,
Normal.
right?
Yeah.
They teach breathing, pranayama in school. They teach you these self-care practices
Mm.
as part of the curriculum there. And so a lot of things that my parents did, we just thought they were nuts.
Yeah.
And turns out that they were like
They're
way ahead
really
of their
smart.
time. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Samantha.
I am so grateful to know you. So grateful to be able to share this space with you. Where can we find you? Where can we follow your work? What do you have coming up? How can we engage? How can we learn more?
Well, thanks for asking. One of the places people can find the raw, unfiltered me is on Facebook. I still
Nice.
am probably the last guy on Facebook. I still use it.
You and
And
Giovanni.
so you can find me there.
Mm.
I have my team transfer stuff to Instagram, so you can certainly follow me there. My Instagram handle is at the Sachin Patel, and on Facebook it's Sachin Patel DC. And then we have some great tools and resources for people to be able to access. One of them is our morning routine. So if you're interested in losing weight and optimizing health, I believe it starts with a healthy morning routine. So they can go to morningroutine.ca. And if they're looking for kind of little going down the scientific rabbit hole of breathing, they can go to
Mhm.
Breathwork with Sachin, and that's where I share my stop snoring guide, my breathe like
Amazing.
this, not that guide, and kind of take people through a process of how to breathe throughout the day
Mm.
in different circumstances. And there's a lot of great tools and free resources in there as well.
So great. Thank you so much. And we'll put all of those links in the show notes so people can have easy access to your world. Sachin, thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Much love, Samantha,
Yeah.
and much love to everyone who tuned in today.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Can't be contained.